But if you have your Vaishnava songbook here, you can turn to page 64. There's a beautiful bhajan by Bhakti Vinod Thakur, and it's very much in line with Purushottama Maas and the mood of Purushottama Maas. I think there are a few more books here. If anyone doesn't have, you can just, Mataji, could you give those books? Anybody else? Anyone? 64. It's known as Vidyara Vilase. Vidyara Vilase Katainu Kana Paramasahase Vidyara Vilase Katainu Kana Paramasahase Vidyara Vilase Katainu Kana Paramasahase Vidyara Vilase Katainu Kana. Could you go a little slower, Prabhu? I don't know whether you can get it a bit slower. Let's see, let's try again. Vidyara, or maybe you start first and then I'll follow, because you're doing one beat, right? You just do that beat first, as slow as you can. Vidyara Vilase Katainu Kana Paramasahasa Vilase Katainu Kana Paramasahasa Vidyara. Okay, now Prabhu, the kartals is also a little bit fast. Can someone keep the kartals going at a certain pace? Radhika, can you just, sorry, because it's a bhajan, so we have to be a little bit, ready, bro? Okay, start again. Vidyara Vilase Katainu Kala Paramasahase Everyone. Vidyara Vilase Katainu Kala Paramasahase Vidyara Vilase Katainu Kala Paramasahase Vidyara Vilase Katainu Kala Paramasahase Tomara charana na bhajinu khabu ekono sharana tumi Tomara charana na bhajinu khabu ekono sharana tumi Porite porite bharasa bharilo jnane gati habe mahani Porite porite bharasa bharilo jnane gati habe mahani Se asha bifala Jnana dhurbhala se jnana ajnana jahani se asa bifala से ज्ञाना दुर्भाग्य से ज्ञाना अज्ञाना जाने जद विद्या जातो माया वैभाव तुम्हारा भजने बाधा जद विद्या जातो माया वैभाव तुम्हारा भजने बाधा मोह जनमिया अनित्य संसारे जीव के खोरोए गाधा मोह जनमिया अनित्य संसारे जीव के खराए गाधा से गधा होए संसारे भोजा बाहिनु अनेका काला से गधा होए संसारे भाजा बाहिनो अनेका काला भादा के एखानो शक्तिरा अभावे किछु नहीं लागे भालो भादा के एखानो शक्तिरा अभावे किछु नहीं लागे भालो जीवन जताना होइलो एखानो से विद्या अविद्या बेलो जीवन जताना होइलो एखानो से विद्या अविद्या भेलो अविद्या ज्वाला गथिलो विषामा से विद्या होइलो शेलो अविद्या ज्वाला गथिलो अभिषामा से विद्या होइलो सेलो तुम्हारा चरण बिना किछु धाना संसारा ना आचे आहारा तुम्हारा चरण बिना किछु धाना संसारा ना आचे आहारा भक्ति विनोदा जदा विद्याचारी तू आपाद कोरे सहारा 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 हरे कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे 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 कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे 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 कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे 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 कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम हरे कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे 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 कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Vidyara vilase Katainu Khala Paramasahase Tumhara charana na bhajinu khabhu ekona sharana tu Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur Maharaj ki. If you have your songbooks, please read the meaning with me. You can actually read it with me. With great confidence, I pass. No, you can read it with me, same time. With great confidence, I pass the time in the pleasures of mundane learning. I never worshipped your lotus feet, O Lord. But now you are my only shelter. Reading on and on, my hope grew, for I considered material knowledge to be life's true path. That hope was fruitless, that knowledge proved feeble. I know now that all such knowledge is ignorance. All mundane knowledge is but the power of the Lord's illusory energy, Maya, and an impediment to your service. It makes an ass out of the eternal soul by bringing about infatuation for this temporary world. Here is one such ass who has for so long carried on his back the burden of material existence. Now, in my old age, for want of the power to enjoy, nothing pleases me. Life has become agony now, that knowledge has become ignorance, and the burning pain of ignorance has become intolerable. Mundane knowledge has become just like a pointed shaft. O Lord, there is no other treasure in this world but your lotus feet. Thus, Bhaktivinoda, giving up all mundane knowledge, makes your lotus feet the sum and substance of his life. Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur Maharaj ki. So we wanted to sing this bhajan today because it just struck me as I was coming here that the whole topic of Purushottama Maas is actually premised on the concept of Sharanagati. And Sharanagati means surrender. So today is a series. Today we'll kick off a series of classes by devotees on the significance of Purushottama Maas. And we hope that by understanding why Purushottama Maas came, we can also begin to understand the significance of that incident of Purushottama Maas coming into this world in the context of Srimad Bhagavatam and devotional service. So this is an important point, I think, for all of us to understand. And since Purushottama Maas is such an important time of the year and it doesn't happen often, it's also good that we are coming together to chant Krishna's names and to hear about Krishna. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari जय गोपी जन वल्लभा गिरिवरधारी। जय गोपी जन वल्लभा गिरिवरधारी। यशोदानंदन व्रज जन रंजन। यशोदानंदन व्रज जन रंजन। यमुना तीरा वनचारी। यमुना तीरा वनचारी। जय राधा माधव कुंज बिहारी। जय राधा माधव कुंज बिहारी। जय गोपी जन वल्लभा गिरिवरधारी। जय गोपी जन वल्लभा गिरिवरधारी। यशोदानंदन व्रज जन रंजन। यशोदानंदन व्रज जन रंजन। यमुना तीरा वनचारी। यमुना तीरा वनचारी। यमुना तीरा वनचारी। जय राधा माधव कुंज बिहारी। जय राधा माधव कुंज बिहारी। जय गोपी जन वल्लभा गिरिवरधारी। जय गोपी जन वल्लभा गिरिवरधारी। यशोदानंदन व्रज जन रंजन। यशोदानंदन व्रज जन रंजन। यमुना तीरा वनचारी। यमुना तीरा वनचारी। हरि बोल। जय राधा माधव कुंज बिहारी। जय राधा माधव कुंज Braj Bihari. Jai Shri Shri Radha Madhav ki, Jai Shri Jagannath Baladev Subhadra Mai ki, Jai Shri Shri Panchatattva ki, Jai Srila Prabhupada ki, Jai Srila Gurudeva ki, Ananta Gauri Vaishnava Vrinda ki, Nitai Gaura Premanande. Prabhu, is this okay? Can you see my face or is it a reflection? Reflection, huh? But I can see you very clearly. And it feels nice. Can you see me smile at least? Okay, that's very good. So we thank everyone for joining us at Gauranga Center today. Purushottama Maas has started and we thought it will be a good chance for us. What will happen is myself and Swayam Prakash Prabhu, we will take turns for the next Saturday, Sunday, Saturday, Sunday, Saturday, Sunday. 6 Sundays. So no, six days all in all, 3 weeks. We will take turns to actually take different portions of the significance of Purushottama Maas. We won't tell you which day each one of us is taking the class, which I think is a very important thing moving forward. Devotees should come not for speakers. They should come to see Krishna and they should come to hear the content of what is being spoken. This is a policy that Srila Prabhupada was very adamant about, and I think that should be the culture that we should also have. In fact, I was talking to Dinavasa Prabhu that next time when we put a program, we will not put the speaker's name. Prakash Govindan Prabhu was also of that opinion and we were discussing it. And I think the good news about that is that nobody should come because of somebody. Everyone should come because of Gauranga Mahaprabhu, Jagannath, Baladev and Subhadra. So if anybody calls Dinavasa Prabhu and asks him, Prabhu, who's taking class? Then you can be assured he's not going to tell you. Right? So we want to break that habit because it's not good, Prabhus and Matajis. Please don't be resistant to this kind of thinking, because this kind of thinking, becomes fanaticism. We flow only because one person is speaking and the other person is not speaking. No. The whole essence of transcendental knowledge is whoever repeats what Srila Prabhupada has given, whoever puts whatever acharyas have stated, that is potent. Whatever that we think in our mind is purely concoction. If we accept with a submissive heart whatever that is spoken, which is not out of Shastras, and which is very emphatically stated and repeated, that knowledge will pierce our hearts and it will purify us. That is the mood in which we should actually approach Bhagavatam and Bhagavad Gita. So our humble request to all of you is that please help us in changing this culture. We don't want this culture to be there. And in that way, we will all grow in devotional service. In business parlance, we don't say, we don't say that, the boss has said we have to work, therefore we have to work. In business parlance, we say the work is the boss. So it doesn't matter who is coming and telling you to do the work. Work is the boss. So it doesn't matter who is presenting Krishna. Krishna is the supreme boss. And we should just come here to hear about Krishna. So Dinavasa Prabhu is not going to answer any queries. Right, Prabhu? You won't. Yeah, that's it. So, what is this Purushottama Maas? And how did Purushottama Maas come? This is an important point for us to understand. We may have read about it here and there, but it's always good for us to hear about it again. From a Vedic calculation point of view, very often the Vedic calendar is comprised of what we call the solar and the lunar years. The beauty of Vedic calendar is that it actually has both running. But when you look at the moon orbits around the planet. So therefore, when there are 12 months, then the moon has orbited the planet 12 times. And according to Vedic astrology, when the moon has actually orbited the planet 12 times, then that is considered to be one lunar year. So generally speaking, that is the lunar year. Then side by side in Vedic astrology, the sun is also having its course. And as the sun moves around the planets, and mind you, this is a very startling proposition. Because when you hear Western concept, the Western concept is all the planets are moving around the sun. But when you read 5th canto of Bhagavatam, you realize, wait a minute, the sun is moving around the planets. And in our mind immediately, we think, it can't be so, something must be wrong with Bhagavatam. Prabhupada addresses that in Bhagavatam 5th canto, so feel free to read it. But the important thing is, the sun has a great orbit, and it moves around all the planets. And when it does so for 12 months in the year, that becomes known as the solar year. Now, Vedic calculation tells us that these two movements are running, but they have different timings. They are not so close, but they are close enough. For example, the moon year takes approximately 354 days, 8 hours, 48 minutes, and 33.55 seconds. That's how exact, by the way, Vedic calculation is. So that is the movement of the moon. The movement of the sun is 365 days, 48 minutes, 47.5 seconds. So if you look at the sun's running of 365 days and the moon's running of 354 days, you'll find that eventually as time moves, the sun and the moon's movement, the gap actually begins to widen. Isn't it so? It begins to widen. And to make up for this difference, Vedic astrology has shown, at least from an astrological point of view, that every 32 months, 16 days, at give and take around that period of time, an additional month is born. And that additional month writes what would have been a very great difference between the lunar and the solar year. And that is how Vedically, astrologically, we can explain how the extra month comes. But in the Padma Purana, which is a very authoritative scripture often quoted by Srila Prabhupada in our Vaishnava Sampradaya, in the Padma Purana, there's a beautiful episode and pastime of how Lord Vishnu and ultimately Krishna received this month. What happened was, when this extra month was actually born, and in Vedic astrology and Vedic culture, rivers and months, they always take the feminine gender. As a term of respect, they are known as in the feminine gender. So like rivers, you never hear male names for rivers. In the same way, when the month was personified, the month was known as a lady. So the month who was personified, she was born into this world because of the difference of time. And when she came into this world, she was then known at that point as an extra month. And sometimes she is known as Adik Maas. It means that it is surplus actually. So when this month was born, it's very interesting, because Padma Puran said that every month in a year, in a normal year, generally speaking, is actually presided by one Devata. So every month actually has a presiding Devata, just like every part of your body, for example, has a presiding Devata. For example, your hands, your palms and your hands, the presiding deity of your hand is actually Indra. So if you were to blame Indra and you slap somebody and someone said, "Why did you slap me?" then you can tell that person, you have to go and find Indra. And don't blame me, because the demigod in charge of my hand is actually Indra. So every month, our Padma Puran says, every month has a presiding Devata. Except for this month, this Adik Maas had no Devata, because she was considered to be surplus. She was an extra appendage that was of no value actually. And because she did not come with any presiding Devata, all the other Devatas refused to touch her. They refused to even volunteer to give some kind of shelter. They did not want to give her shelter. And when a month has a Devata, then astrologically speaking, what happens is every month has what we call auspicious periods and inauspicious periods. And during the auspicious periods, people are told to do certain things. And during inauspicious period, people are told not to do certain things. And very often, every month will also have the movement of the sun moving into the astrological houses. It is very often known as Sankranti. So Sankranti time is considered to be also an important time in every month. But because Surya and Chandra were not present in the birth of this new month, what happened was there was no Sankranti period also. And Padma Puran tells us that this month, she did not have even the touch of the sun. She did not even have the blessings of Surya. And therefore all the other months rejected her. And then all the other devatas refused to give her any shelter also. So what happened was, this month was rejected by other months, rejected by the devatas, and no one wanted to be associated with her because, think about it, logically if no devata is presiding over this month, there is no auspicious, inauspicious period. By default, everything is inauspicious. So therefore, in that way, all the months shunned this inauspicious month. You know, generally the human tendency is, if somebody comes and says, this is a very inauspicious place, you won't go there, isn't it, generally? If supposing you want to do something and someone comes to you and say, Prabhu, it's a very inauspicious time. It takes a very strong devotee, to say, it doesn't matter auspicious, inauspicious, we'll do it. Most of us will say, no, Krishna consciousness is above it. And then silently on the side, we'll think about what's a good time for this, what's a good time for that. So actually, we should really also question our faith, But this month was put aside because she was considered to be very inauspicious. So that's why she got another name. And that name is known as Maas. And in fact, if you ask the majority of people who claim to know Vedic culture, they will tell you that during this period of month, they don't do anything. Most Pandits, Purohits, they will tell you this is not an auspicious month to start anything, to do anything. It is not considered a time to touch or do anything because it's considered to be inauspicious. However, from a spiritual point of view, this month is considered the most auspicious month. Why? Because there is no inauspiciousness in this month. There is no inauspicious. Therefore, from a Vaishnava point of view, there is only auspiciousness. Why? It is not because this month was extra. It's actually because of the conduct of the month. Something is auspicious not because of the stars or the moon. Something becomes auspicious in Vaishnava philosophy because of saintly conduct. Where there is saintly conduct, there is always auspiciousness. But where there is no saintly conduct, then even if we find the most auspicious period to perform an action, because that action is not saintly, therefore ultimately it is inauspicious. So you see, from the argument of the acharyas, it's very clear what really is auspiciousness and what is inauspiciousness. So this month, Padma Puran tells us, she began to feel very rejected. She began to feel very dejected. She felt very minimized. She felt very abandoned. In fact, everyone did not even give her any recourse. She turned to the other months because they are all contemporaries. But the other months did not give her any shelter or any assistance. She turned to the devatas, but the devatas refused to touch her. So because she could not turn anywhere and she was very morose, she decided that the best thing for me to do is ultimately to take shelter of one who can actually give me shelter. And therefore, in her mind and in her heart, this Adhik Maas began to think very carefully. Instead of turning to someone who cannot give me shelter, better I turn to someone who can actually give me shelter. Actually, Adhik Maas was also very smart. She did not try very hard to turn to the devatas for shelter. The Padma Puran tells us because, in truth, the devatas cannot be sources of shelter for us also. They are all taking shelter from Krishna. This point is very nicely explained in Srimad Bhagavatam. In the 6th canto, 9th chapter, 25th verse, 6, 9, 25. This is the episode of Ritasur. There's a very nice shloka that we should remember in relation to Purushottama. Ya eka isho nijamaya naha sasarjayena anusjama vishwam vayam na yasyapi puraha samihitaha Pashyamalingam pritad ishamaninaha. You have put it up, is it, Prabhuji? Oh, okay, thank you, Prabhu. So the translation is very nice. The Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is speaking? The Devatas are speaking. They are all performing prayers to Krishna. And this is their prayer, it's not anybody else's prayer, it's their prayer. So this is what they say. They say, the Supreme Personality of Godhead is the one who created us. And He created us by His external potency. And it is only by His mercy that we are expanding the creation of this universe. This is very important. Vishwa means the universe, and Anusrajama means we create. So the Devatas are admitting that, frankly speaking, we appear to be the creators of this universe, but actually He is the one who has created this universe, and by His mercy we appear to expand the creation. So then they admit that Krishna is in everyone's heart as super soul, but we cannot see His form. So sometimes the question is asked, if Krishna is in the heart of everyone, why is it we cannot see Him? And the reason is given by the Devatas. We are unable to see Him because all of us think that we are separate and independent gods. And mind you, gods here is small g, not big G. So Prabhupada starts the purport. I can't remember the purport, but the purport will say something like, this is the reason, right? Is it stated there, Prabhu? This is the reason why. Can someone read that point? Vishal Prabhu? Is it there? This is why we cannot see or understand the Supreme Personality. Yes. Prabhupada makes it very clear why we cannot see Krishna. Krishna is in our heart as super soul. Why we cannot perceive Him? As long as we think that we are separate, as long as we think we are independent, and therefore we can do anything we want according to whatever we think is right, we will never take the shelter of Krishna. Because that is not the principle of Sharanagati. Sharanagati means that we are surrendered to Krishna. And whatever Krishna wants becomes what we want. Whether we like it or not, that is how we are. So a devotee, right, has a very different conception of life. And that's why Adhik Maas did not surrender to the Devatas. Because even though in the beginning she thought that maybe they could help, she realized, after she was meditating deeply on who is the source of all shelters, that these Devatas cannot give shelter. And it is confirmed in 6.9.25. They themselves confirmed that they cannot give shelter. So what to speak of then the other months? Nobody could give shelter to Adhik Maas. So then Adhik Maas started praying very hard to the supreme divine form of the Lord. And the more she prayed, the more she took shelter. So she took shelter of one who is known as the source of all shelters. And that is known in Bhagavatam as Param Parayanam, the shelter of all shelters. So then she turned to Krishna in His beautiful form of Lord Vishnu. And she surrendered to Lord Vishnu because He is the supreme auspicious. He is the supreme perfect. And therefore He is known as Purushottama. Why should we surrender to anyone short of one who is perfect? And that is why Adhik Maas turned to Lord Vishnu. When Lord Vishnu saw that she had surrendered so nicely to Him, what did He do? Padma Puran said that Lord Vishnu immediately took her to Golok Vrindavan. And there she took darshan of Krishna. And Adhik Maas at that point of time surrendered to the lotus feet of Krishna, who is known in his feature as that person who is the perfect personality, Purusha Uttama. And that is why he is known as Purushottama. At this point of time, the Sastras and the Acharyas tell us that the mood in which Adhik Maas surrendered to Lord Krishna is actually given in Srimad Bhagavatam. It is given in Srimad Bhagavatam. And it is given very much in the episode of Gajendra the elephant. You all know that Gajendra the elephant was a very powerful king, and that he was the king of all the elephants. He had many wives, many children, generals, but he was undisputed in strength and power. So what happened was one day, he came down from the mountains of the Tirikuta, and he entered into this beautiful large lake. And when he entered that lake, Bhagavatam tells us Gajendra's mood was one of I lording over material nature, thinking that there is no one above me, no one as strong as me. So pride caused Gajendra to turn to these waters. There was no reason for him to go there, but he went in. And instead of being very calm and peaceful, because we are entering somebody else's house, the lake is not your house. The forest is a natural place for the elephant to be. But land is the natural place for the elephant to be. But it is not the place of the lake is not the place which is natural. But Gajendra went into the lake, and created so much disturbance with all the other elephants that Bhagavatam says it disturbed the real owner of the lake, who was the crocodile. And this crocodile in Bhagavatam represents the network of material illusion. When we move around this material world, very often, we believe, as the demigods believe, that we are one, separate, and two, that we are independent. And this separate nature and independent nature is what catches us into the jaws of material nature. And this crocodile caught hold of the right front foot of Gajendra, and he did not let go. Gajendra first thought his might would be able to shake off the crocodile, but in vain. Gajendra then turned to his elephants, generals and friends and told him, "You come and help me." And they formed a line and tried to pull him. They failed. Then he turned to his wives who were equally strong, and they pitched in to help, and they failed. Even the little children pitched in to help, but they all failed. No one could actually give shelter to this great king, because they all thought that he was the source of shelter, and he could not give them shelter. So in the end, the generals abandoned him, because they say, "Gajendra, we came to you because you are the source of all our shelter, but obviously you're not strong, so we will go to someone else." Then the wife said, "We can't wait here, husband, for a long time. We have to take care of the children. You're supposed to maintain us, so goodbye." And when the wives left, the children also left. And therefore, Gajendra was left alone. And Gajendra looked around, And as he looked around, he thought, who else can help me now? Who can I turn to? Gajendra's feeling was one of abandonment. Gajendra's feeling was one of being neglected. Gajendra's feeling was one of feeling completely morose, because he had no shelter. And that was what he was looking for. And in this material world, my Guru Maharaj always used to tell us, everyone is looking for a soft corner. Because that soft corner is where we can take shelter. A soft corner means a place where we can get compassion, some understanding, and some genuine love. And because this is the material world, it is very hard to find a place which has a soft corner. And so Gajendra was finding a soft corner to alleviate his miseries. He realized that his body was in trouble, his life was in trouble. And just like Adik Maas felt helpless, abandoned, neglected, he also felt the same way. And my Guru Maharaj, when he took this Bhagavad Saptaha lectures, where he spoke many years ago in Australia, and he spoke about these great pastimes, he said one very important point. He said, in this material world, if someone scolds you, it's all right. But if someone neglects you or ignores you, it's more painful than being scolded. So actually, neglect is a worse kind of suffering in this material world than actually positively being scolded. At least if someone scolds you, they recognize that you are somebody. That's why they're firing you. But imagine if somebody just walks past you, doesn't see you, ignores you. Maharaj said it's a very painful thing actually. So Gajendra felt neglected. Adik Maas felt neglected. But they were intelligent. They thought, why to turn to others? Because others are also neglected in this material world. This is a very important point. When we are neglected by others, we don't blame them for neglecting us, because they are also harassed by the material modes of nature. So why are we actually running after them? We are not running after Krishna. The same source of this point of Adik Maas was also shown in Srimad Bhagavatam by Pingala. Pingala thought that the source of her prosperity, her peace, her happiness, her joy was in satisfying other men. She thought by satisfying their senses, she will always be satisfied. But when she grew old, the source of her attraction also became old, and the men just decided to ignore her. And one day, Bhagavatam says, she just stood, on the doorway of her house, waiting for anyone to come so that she could satisfy them. But after a long wait, nobody came. And at that point of time, a strong wave of renunciation swept across Pingala. And she then realized at that point, Shantam Shamipe Ramanam Rati Pradam. Shantam Shamipe Ramanam Rati Pradam. The source of my pleasure and the source of my attraction has always been that Supreme Personality of Godhead, who has always been in my heart, and yet I have looked for shelter everywhere, but I have not looked at the right place. So Adik Maas, even though she was considered to be Malamas, that's the beauty of it. she was considered to be a wasted month. In other words, anyone in that month, anything you do, it's considered wasted time. But the best part is she did not waste time. The irony is she did not waste time. She immediately surrendered to Vishnu, and Vishnu brought her to Krishna. See the beauty of it? So we could be in a very auspicious month, but if we are wasting time, then that month is as good as Maas for us, isn't it? Because we are not using it for Krishna. What's the point then? So we should be very clear about a difference. There is a vast difference between spiritual understanding of Shastra and ritualistic ceremonial understanding of Shastras. We are not in the business of making devotional service into a ritual. And therefore, Gajendra then decided, let me turn now to Krishna. But how he turns to Krishna and what mood he has turning to Krishna is the same principle that Adik Maas had. And that is the principle that is known as Sharanagati in Bhagavatam and in all our Shastras. And he sings very nicely, Hitam Gajendra Sayadapa Sankatam Pranasya Dehi Vivasho Yadrichayaha Aparayan Atma Vimokshane Chiram Dadhyau Imam Buddhi Mathabhyapatyata Namami Me Nyataya Aturam Gajaha Kutakarnya Prabhavanti Mochitam Grahena Pashena Vidhatur Avritta Apiyaham Chatam Yami Paramparayanam. This Paramparayanam principle comes from this portion of Bhagavatam. And it is found in the 8th canto, 2nd chapter, 31st and 32nd verses. These were the 2 verses that we just chanted. The meaning is very beautiful. Translation. When the king of the elephants saw that he was actually under the clutches of the crocodile, and he was under the clutches of the crocodile not by his will, but by the will of providence. In Bhagavatam, this is known as Yadrichaya. Have you noticed something, Prabhus and Matajis? You are going this way. You want to go straight, but somehow the forces of your life are such you have to turn right. Has it happened to you before in life? You don't want to do something with somebody, can't settle some things, or you don't want to work with a colleague. You try very hard not to work. In the end, you end up working with him. It's happened very often, isn't it? You don't want to do something, but life is such, whole life you have to do the thing you don't want to do. It happens, isn't it? Sometimes, you say, I don't want to do something, and yet the force of nature is so compelling you have to do it. So Gajendra recognized that he was being held against his will, but by the will of providence. And that is the first step to surrender. That is what Adik Maas realized. When Adik Maas was born, she did not blame anyone. Very important point. She did not point finger at anyone. Very important point. She accepted that is Yadrichaya. Yadrichaya. Yadrichaya sometimes in Bhagavad Gita is also known as in the ordinary course of events. It's a very nice point. In the ordinary course of events. That means you are trying to go some way, but in a very ordinary way something happens. So that is Yadrichaya. And then Gajendra realized that I'm circumstantially helpless. There's no one who can help me. And I'm embodied, meaning my body is in danger. And then he began to think, nobody can save me from danger because I cannot save myself from danger. And he became extremely afraid. Sometimes, we think that fear is something that devotees should not feel, because we are supposed to be abhayam. But in Shastras, we hear very often that Devaki Mata, for example, was very fearful of Kamsa. In Janmashtami, in 10th canto, you will hear Devaki Mata saying that she was very fearful of Kamsa. And Srila Prabhupada writes in the purport that Kamsa represents material association. And therefore, a devotee is always afraid of material association. That fear is not a negative fear. It is a fear that induces humility. Because if we don't have any fear of this material world overwhelming us, we will become very proud. So when Gajendra became extremely afraid of being killed, it actually increased his desire to gain shelter. So then he consequently thought for a long time. Now this is very important. My Guru Maharaj said this point that's really important. For a long time. This for a long time is very important because you look at the word-to-word meaning. It for a long time is translated actually as dadhyao. You will not see the word long in the word-to-word transliteration. Do you see it? This is really the fun part of studying Bhagavatam, It's like a puzzle. Wait a minute. Prabhupada says for a long time, but you look in the word-to-word, there is no long time. What is there? Begin to think seriously. You can only start thinking seriously if you think for a long time. If you just listen to Bhagavatam and go home, and you don't think about it for a long time, it's very hard to be serious about Bhagavatam. That's why in one way, it's good we're not serving prasadam here, because very often when we go downstairs, the general tendency is for us to forget what happened upstairs, isn't it? Very quickly we forget upstairs, and then we talk to each other about everything else except Bhagavatam. But now we have to just pick up the packets and go. Hopefully as we're going out, we should think longer about what we heard. So therefore, long time means that you think seriously. Therefore, when we contemplate, then only we begin to seek shelter of Krishna. This Bhagavatam is never meant to be just read and close the book. It is meant to simmer. It is meant to take some time. So Gajendra, of course, had plenty of time. 1,000 years he was stuck there. So in one way he had so much time. But we don't have so much time. Adhik Maas is only one more extra month in this year. Next year she's gone. So there is no extra time. So we need to think now. My Guru Maharaj said that the difference between an advanced devotee and a struggling devotee is 5 minutes. It is 5 minutes. Why? Because the advanced devotee finishes hearing the class and he takes 5 minutes more to remember the class. The struggling devotee finished the class and immediately he goes on to do something material. And that 5 minutes difference makes that serious devotee advance. That is the meaning of long time. So he thought for a long time and he finally reached the following decision. And what was his decision? The same decision that Adhik Maas took, and that's in the next verse. In the next verse, Gajendra very nicely says, the other elephants who are my friends and masters, friends and relatives, what happened to them? They could not help me from this danger. They could not. Then he says, what to speak of my wives? Even my wives won't be able to help me. They cannot do anything. Now, Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur and the Acharyas say, when Gajendra said they cannot do anything, what kind of mood was he in? Was he in the mood, they can't do anything? Was he frustrated? No, he was not frustrated. They cannot do anything means he was in the mood of acceptance. He had accepted that nobody can help him. The same way, Pingala accepted that no one can satisfy her. In the same way that Sudama accepted that I've come to see Krishna but he has given me nothing. The same way that Parikshit Maharaj accepted that I have only 7 days, now don't waste time. The same way that Vyasadeva accepted that now I am despondent because it is my fault. I have not glorified Krishna. This acceptance is a very important part of taking shelter. The faster we accept and see the hand of Krishna, the faster we will make advancement in devotional service. The more we resist the hand of Krishna, the more we are stubborn against the hand of Krishna, then the more demonic and asuric becomes our mentality. So it was a very important point. And then he says, they cannot do anything because it is the will of providence that I have been attacked by this crocodile. It's not their fault. Therefore, see, now he concludes, therefore, I shall seek shelter of that Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is always the shelter of everyone, even of great personalities. So this same mood, I wanted to quote these two shlokas, because these two shlokas is the mood in which Adhik Maas reacted to her abandonment. This is the mood in which she responded to her neglect. instead of feeling sorry for herself and wallowing in self-pity, she accepted the proposition. She accepted the principle, and then she increased her devotional surrender to Krishna. And so that is what she did. She turned to Krishna. And that is why this principle that Bhaktivinoda Thakur Maharaj speaks about so much, when he was here in this world, this principle of Sharanagati is very important for us. And in this first class, right, in this series, we want to end by being very clear about what is Sharanagati. Sharanagati appears as a principle of surrender, and it is found in Hari Bhakti Vilas. That is where it is found. But it was quoted very nicely by Chaitanya Mahaprabhu in Madhya Leela. Madhya Leela, chapter 22, text 100. So when you all have time, this purport and this shloka must be very seriously studied, especially during this month. So the principle of surrender is 6 items will be there. So if someone wanted to know whether they are surrendered, if supposing you came up to a devotee and said, Prabhu, Mataji, how do I know if I'm surrendered? Then Bhaktivinoda Thakur says, when you are surrendered, you will have 6 symptoms. If you have these 6 symptoms, it is considered that you are surrendered. And what are these 6 symptoms? Anukulyasya sankalpaha, pratikulyasya varjanam, rakshishyati vishvaso, goptritve varanam tadha, atma nikshepa karpanne, and sadvidda sharanagati. Very important. Now, look at the translation, Prabhus, Matajis. The translation says, the 6 divisions of surrender are, number 1, acceptance of those things favorable to devotional service. Second, the rejection of unfavorable things. Third, the conviction that Krishna will give protection. 4, the acceptance of the Lord as one's guardian and master. So nice. And 5, full self-surrender. Full self-surrender. And then 6 is humility. If you want to know the items very well, look at the word-to-word meaning. It's a good exercise for us. Then you will understand what they mean. Look at anukulyasya. That means the first thing we must do when we want to surrender to Krishna is that anything that assists us in the devotional service to Krishna, we do sankalpaha, meaning we accept. So you should look into your life, your relationships, your movement around people, your lifestyle, your activities. If these activities, relationships, anything, if they assist you in discharging devotional service, then sankalpaha, you accept them. The second symptom then, which follows the first, is that pratikulyasya. Look at the word to word. Anything that hinders devotional service. If you find some association is disturbing, if you find some activity doesn't make you remember Krishna, then very simple, varjanam. Not partial rejection, not 1/4 rejection, but complete rejection. Complete rejection. In the purport, Prabhupada says there's another way to explain pratikulyasya, varjanam. You know what is an easier way to explain it? Renunciation. That's it. You look at the purport, Prabhupada will say that. When you reject something which is unfavorable to devotional service, that is called renunciation. It's a nice point that we sometimes forget, To renounce something means that we renounce something which is actually unfavorable to devotional service. It is maybe illusory and attractive, but because it is unfavorable, we reject it. So these 2 symptoms become very important in a devotee. The third is very nice. Rakshishyati. Rakshishyati means Krishna will protect. See, He will protect. And why will He protect? He will protect because Vishvasaha. Vishvasaha means because the devotee has a strong conviction. That is why Krishna is protecting the devotee. He's protecting the devotee because the devotee is he's responding to Krishna by having a strong conviction that only Krishna can give me protection. Adik Maas had that conviction. Gajendra had that conviction. Kunti Mata surrendered to Krishna. She had that conviction. Pahi Pahi Mahayogin, Uttara had that conviction. Arjuna, right? Krishna Krishna Mahabaho, he had that conviction. So this is the conviction that we are talking. Vishwasaha. Vishwasaha means with great conviction and great determination. And what is this determination about? This determination is that Krishna alone can give shelter. No other person, no other personality, no other devata, no one in this world can give shelter except Krishna. That is very important. Then look at the next one. Goptritve. In being the guardian, like the father or husband, master or maintainer. In other words, one accepts Krishna as the guardian or the master. This is a very important point. Some people will say, aren't these two the same? Aren't these two supposed to be the same? But the first one says, always firmly believe in the Lord's protection. But the second one says, feel exclusively dependent on the Lord's mercy. This is a very important point. When we say that Krishna is my guardian or master, what we are saying is we are exclusively dependent on Krishna's mercy and no one else's mercy. This is a very important point. And once we understand that, then you have the word full self-surrender. What does full self-surrender mean? This is also a very important point. Look at the purport. When you go down to the purport, as you go down, you will see the numbers there. 1, 2, 3, 4, come to 5. Sometimes people ask, what does it mean to self-surrender? Surrender the self, what does it mean? Prabhupada writes very nicely, self-surrender means remembering that one's activities and desires are not independent. That is the meaning of self-surrender. It actually means that we never think for any moment that our activities and our desires are independent of Krishna. If you have time, read the preface to Chaitanya Charitamrita. In the preface to Chaitanya Charitamrita, Prabhupada mentions the 6 items of surrender. You don't have to go to that, but I'll tell you now because I can quote it to you. In that preface, Prabhupada explains this number 5 item in even more detail. He says that the 5th item means that we should have no other interests which are separate from Krishna. That means our interests must always be aligned with Krishna. And if you read Narada's advice to Vyasadeva in 1.5.14 of Srimad Bhagavatam, you don't have to move it, you can check it, you'll find Tato Anyata. That verse, it is very nicely stated there that as long as your vision, your activities are not in line with the vision of the Lord, and as long as you don't describe anything which is in line with the vision of the Lord, then that description, that activity will react in different name, form and activity to cause agitation of the mind. So we can understand if we are surrendered so practically when we become agitated. When we are always agitated because we are frustrated with an activity we are doing, because it is not coming the way we want to, then this 5th item of surrender must pop up in our mind. It means we are not aligned. So self-surrender doesn't mean, I surrender myself. What does it really mean? Prabhupada makes it very clear. It means always remember that your activity and desires must never be independent of Krishna. They must always be aligned with Krishna. And the last symptom of a surrendered devotee are these 2 very beautiful words, meek and humble. In Christian faith, so nicely it is stated by Jesus Christ, the kingdom of God is open to those who are meek and humble. That is the same point in Sharanagati. Humility and being meek. Being meek means we don't go around telling people, I'm right, I'm right, I'm right. We don't go around forcing people into what we are thinking. We don't have this Gunda mentality, it's either me or finished. No. Devotee never does that. A devotee is very humble. A devotee never imposes. A devotee simply displays saintly conduct. That is all that is needed. So when we try to understand these 6 symptoms of surrender, then only we can actually see, if you look very carefully, what was Adik Maas doing. Adik Maas, when she presented herself to Krishna, she had the same mood actually. If you think very carefully, she rejected everything unfavorable. She was disturbed, she was neglected, but then she dropped it. But immediately by surrendering to Krishna, she wanted to accept everything that is favorable. Then the other thing that is there is that she turned to no one else except Krishna as the shelter, because she had great faith and conviction that only Krishna is my guardian. She was not after the Devatas. She was only after Krishna, who is Paramparayanam. That is the same thing Gajendra did also. And when they did that, then self-surrender came very nicely. Self-surrender means immediately, because she was surrendered to Krishna, she was prepared to accept whatever Krishna was going to give her. Anything. Just like Gajendra, he was prepared at that point to accept anything that the Supreme Personality of Godhead was going to give him. That's why when Krishna came on Garuda, he offered a lotus. He offered in lotus because he was aligned with whatever Krishna wants. That is the significance of the lotus. And finally, Gajendra was not proud. Because he was fearful of the material condition, he became humble. That is why when we are fearful of material condition, it automatically forces us to become humble. If you read Nectar of Devotion, one of the ways in which humility is induced in the hearts of a devotee is fear. It is fear. So many examples are given by Rupa Goswami in Nectar of Devotion. So fear is not a negative thing for a devotee. Prabhupada said that a devotee who is growing in devotional service should always pray to Krishna for protection. When you pray to Krishna for protection, it implies that you're fearful of something. That's why you came to him, isn't it? But you are turning to him because you know he is the one who can give you fearlessness. That is the only thing that is the difference between devotee and a materialist. So when Adik Maas did that, she became very surrendered. So she turned to Krishna, and with simplicity, with humility, and with the mood of helplessness, she fell at his lotus feet. And because she approached him this way, Padma Puran also tells us one important point. She did not go and present her petition as a complaint to Krishna. She did not say, Krishna, I was abandoned. Krishna, this person neglected me. Krishna, that person did not talk to me. No. When Dharma, the bull, and the cow, when she and the bull were actually harassed and beaten by Kali, and Parikshit Maharaj came and stopped Kali, and then asked them to point out who the perpetrator was, what did the cow and bull do? The cow and bull said, who is the cause of our suffering? Who is the original cause of our suffering? They did not point finger at the cow and at Kali at all. They did not. Parikshit Maharaj, like a transcendental policeman, he was like, look, fill up the police report. Identify the witness. Identify the perpetrators. Then I'll have them. All they needed to do was point. But the bull and cow did not point. And Adik Maas did not point also. She simply accepted that whatever treatment that she had received was actually befitting her condition. And this is another principle given by Bhagavatam in the prayers of the unborn child. The unborn child gives you this principle of Sharanagati, that we don't point at anyone. Self-surrender means we just become aligned with Krishna and we accept whatever Krishna has given. That is self-surrender. And this verse is very nice in Bhagavatam. 3:31:12. 3:31:12. Very important verse to understand Purushottama Maas. Tasyopasannam avitum jagad ichchayata nanataro bhuvichalat charanarvindam soham vrajami sharanam akuto bhayam me yene drishi gatiradarshya sato anurupa. The verse is very beautiful because the unborn child says, I take shelter of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, his lotus feet. I take shelter of him because he is the one who comes in various eternal forms, and charanara vindam. He is always walking on the surface of this earth. And I take shelter of him only, no one else. Because he can give me relief from all fear. See? It is only Krishna who can grant fearlessness. And then he says, not only do I take shelter of him because he can give me fearlessness, but I also take shelter of him because I have received this condition of my own suffering because it is befitting my impious activities. The jantur, unborn child, does not blame anyone. He's not shouting or she's not shouting at the mother. Not blaming anyone. Whatever Krishna has given me in this condition is perfect. And that is why my Guru Maharaj ended this portion of Purushottama Maas lectures many years ago by saying that there is a deep connection between self-satisfaction and self-surrender. Self-satisfaction and self-surrender. When we accept anything that comes as Krishna, then we become satisfied. When we are satisfied in that way, our activities automatically become aligned. And that is self-surrender. You see the connection? But when we are never satisfied with what is coming, always hankering for something, then our activities will automatically not be aligned with Krishna. Because we will perform activities which are known as sinful activities or offensive activities. Because we are moved by sense gratification. So, the conclusion is very important today. Adhik Maas fell at the lotus feet of Krishna and she surrendered to him. And when she surrendered to him, Krishna became so happy with her. And he told her one very important point. He told her that because you have surrendered to me, I will now bestow on you 2 boons. The first boon is that you will no longer be a month which is not sheltered. I will not assign a devata to you. Instead, I myself will personally give you shelter. Can you imagine? Getting personally the shelter of Krishna. What else do we want, And that's what he did. He gave her personally shelter. And anytime someone sincerely practices the principle of Sharanagati, Krishna will definitely accept him or her. This point of how much effort we must put in and how much mercy is coming from Krishna will become the second point that we will discuss. I will discuss. Swayam Prakash Prabhu tomorrow will give other examples, but the next point that I will take next week will be the point of where does effort start and where does mercy come in. That is the principle that we want to understand. And so, Krishna then told Adhik Maas that I will give you shelter. And because I am there in your month, there will be never a day in that month when any time is inauspicious. There will never be a point in the month when there will be inauspiciousness. And therefore, because you did not waste time, you as an extra month, anyone who takes shelter of you will also use their time wisely for me. And I give them the benediction that anyone who uses time in this month, your month, whatever effects they could do in other months with their auspicious, inauspicious dates, will be multiplied thousands of time in this month. So what can we learn from Purushottama Maas? The first thing we can learn is, in Kali Yuga, we will always face neglect, abandonment, helplessness, and moroseness. It is never going to go away. Either you'll do it to someone or someone will do it to you. But instead of despairing, like Adhik Maas, we should cultivate the correct attitude. She did not blame anyone, so we don't blame anyone. And therefore, if we immediately chant Krishna's names in response to all these difficult times, then Jagat Pavitram, it will purify and sanctify this universe, but more importantly, it will sanctify our heart. The third point that we can learn from Purushottama Maas is that extra time, if not used for Krishna, is wasted time. Then it is Malamas. If we have any extra time and we say, I want to relax, that is Malamas already. But if we use that extra time for Krishna, immediately Purushottama Maas has been invoked. So Purushottama Maas we don't have to become very saintly, once every 3 years, 34 months or whatever. We should be saintly every day. Because every day that time is wasted is time that is gone. Adik Maas did not waste time, and she immediately surrendered to Krishna. And how did she surrender? By becoming dependent on him. Chetasaha sarva karmani mayi sannyasa paraha buddhi yogam upashritya mat chitta satatam bhava. 1857. Krishna tells Arjuna, just be dependent on me. And if you dedicate your activities to me, then you will become conscious of me. So how's the formula there? One who is dependent becomes dedicated. One who is dedicated can then become conscious. Easy. DDC. Dedication, dependency, then dedication, and then you become conscious. And when someone becomes conscious, then what is that verse? What is that? Mat chitta sarva durgani, mat prasada tarisyasi. If you become conscious of me, then sarva durgani, whatever obstacles there may be, Krishna guarantees that you will be able to cross over all the obstacles. But if you don't depend on Krishna, atachetvam ahankaram nashroyasi vinangshasi. If you don't become dependent on Krishna, then you do what you want. Don't align yourself with him. Don't take him as shelter. Don't surrender to him. And when that happens, you will be lost. Krishna is very clear. You will be lost. So today we should take back this very important point. And that is why Purushottama Maas received the full shelter. And that is why she became so peaceful and so happy. And that is the principle of Sharanagati. Remember we sang this beautiful bhajan just now? And if you remember the the lyrics of the bhajan, that is the mood of Bhaktivinoda Thakur. Bhaktivinoda Thakur said, I pass time in the pleasure of mundane learning. Sometimes, we think that by learning so many shlokas and learning so much about the technical aspects of spiritual life, we are making advancement. But Bhaktivinoda Thakur says, in the end, I became a donkey. Of course, the Thakur is not donkey, but he's teaching us how we become donkeys when we think, that we are philosophically very sound. So Bhagavatam is really about action, isn't it, Prabhus, Matajis? It's really about conduct. The mind will resist, It will tell you all the things you're not supposed to do. But that's the point where you must reject that which is unfavorable. Jai Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam ki, Srila Prabhupada ki, Srila Gurudev ki, Ananta Kodi Vaishnavrinda ki, Nitai Gaura Premanande. Jai Srila Prabhupada ki. Dinvatsa Prabhu, should we start with chapter 15? So let's start chanting chapter 15. That would be nice. Who is going to chant chapter 15? Anyone here? Who's Dinvatsa Prabhu? Someone is chanting? Pratalashi Mataji, you are there? Yes. Yeah, please. No. Mataji, you want the Bhagavad Gita? It's here. Maybe just pass her the Bhagavad Gita. Prabhu, just Bhagavad Gita. Yeah. So let's chant chapter 15 together and then we can do Arati.
छन्दांसि यस्य पद्मानि यस्तं वेद स वेदवेत् अधश्चोद्वं प्रश्रुतस्तस्य साका गुणा प्रवृत्ता विषया प्रवाला अधश्च मूलानि अनुसन्ततानि कर्मानुबन्धीनि मनुष्यलोके न रूपमश्येह ततोपलभ्यते नान्तो न चादिर्न च सम्प्रतिष्ठा अश्वत्थमेनं सुविरूढमूलम् असङ्गशस्त्रेण दृढेन चित्वा ततः पदं तत्परिमार्गितव्यम् यस्मिन् गता न निवर्तन्ति भूयः त्वमेव चाद्यं पुरुषं प्रपद्ये यतः प्रवृत्तिः प्रश्रुता पुराणी निर्माणमोहाजितसङ्गदोष अध्यात्मनित्या विनिवृत्तकामा द्वन्द्वैर्विमुक्ताः सुखदुःखसंज्ञे गच्छन्तमूढः पदमव्ययं तत् न तद्भासयते सूर्यो न शशाङ्को न पावकः यद्गत्वा न निवर्तन्ते तद्धाम परमं मम ममैवांशो जीवलोके जीवभूतः सनातनः मनः षष्ठानि इन्द्रियाणि प्रकृतिस्थानि कर्षति शरीरं यदवाप्नोति यच्चापुत्कामतीश्वरः गृहीत्वैतानि संयाति वायुर्गन्धानि वाशया श्रोत्रं चक्षुः स्पर्शनं च रसनं घ्राणमेव च अधिष्ठाय मनश्चायं विषयानुपसेवते उत्क्रामन्तं स्थितं वापि भुञ्जानं वा गुणान्वितं विमूढानानुपश्यन्ति पश्यन्ति ज्ञानचक्षुषः यतन्तो योगिनश्चैनं पश्यन्तात्मनः स्थितं यतन्तोऽपि अकृतात्मानो नैनं पश्यन्त चेतसः यदादित्यगतं तेजो जगद्भासयते अखिलं यच्चन्द्रमसि यच्चाग्नौ तत्तेजो विद्धि मामकम् गामाविश्य च भूतानि धारयामहमोजसा पुष्णामि पक्वौषधी सर्वा सोमो भूत्वा रसात्मकः विश्वानरो भूत्वा ज्ञानिनां संश्रितः प्राणापानसमायुक्तः पचाम्यन्नं चतुर्विधं सर्वस्य चाहं हृदि सन्निविष्टो मत्तः स्मृतिर्ज्ञानमपोहनं च वेदैश्च सर्वैरहमेव वेद्यो वेदान्तकृद्वेदविदेव चाहं द्वामिमौ पुरुषौ लोके क्षरश्चाक्षर एव च क्षरः सर्वाणि भूतानि कूटस्थोऽक्षर उच्यते उत्तमः पुरुषस्त्वान्यः परमात्मेति उदाहृतः यो लोकत्रयमाविश्य बिभर्ति अव्ययीश्वरः यस्माक्षरम् अतीतोऽहम् अक्षरादपि चोत्तमः अतोऽस्मि लोके वेदे च प्रतीतः पुरुषोत्तमः यो मामेवम् असम्मूढो जानाति पुरुषोत्तमं स सर्वविद् भजति मां सर्वभावेन भारत इति गुह्यतमं शास्त्रम् इदं भुक्त्वं मया नघ एतद्बुद्ध्वा बुद्धिमानस्य कृतकृत्यश्च भारत हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे जय।